bomb here. I'll kill her. I'll blow this whole place up.
Go ahead. I don't shot her. Hey, just relax, amigo. You want to talk? We'll talk. I'm a sucker for good conversation.
I don't want to talk to you. Now you bring in the television cameras in here now. Come on, bring it in.
Can't do that.
Why?
I don't deal with psychos. I put them away.
I ain't no psycho, man. I'm a hero. You're looking at a fucking hunter. I'm a hero of the new world.
You're a disease, and I'm the cure.
Die!
Drop it!
What's causing the multiverse to cry out in pain, to be the dark place that we know it to be? It's not balanced. The Harmonium and others want to stop crime as it is occurring and put the offenders in the blinds. That's all well and good, but what about the Burks that get away? The crooks that violate the purity and sanctity of the planes? It's no secret, especially in Sigil, that loads of people give the law the laugh. So who cares if some cross-trader steals a widow's life savings or another cuts down a young man in the prime of his life for looking at him cross-eyed? It ain't no skin off my nose. Well, listen to me, Cutter, 'cause it is. Every time a crime goes unpunished, a weight is added to the scales of justice, pushing it out of kilter. That skewing of justice towards anarchy and chaos is like a split of wood under your fingernail. A terrible, penetrating mark of torment that compels us not to rest until punishment is given. That's where the Mercykillers come in, so named because they have vowed to destroy any mercy in their hunt for justice. The Red Death, as they're also called, believe in upholding justice by capturing and punishing lawbreakers. They're the prison wardens, torturers, executioners, and bounty hunters of Sigil and the Plains. They don't act to stop crime, they wait eagerly for a sentence to be handed down to a crook, then they exert due punishment. Mercykillers aren't allowed to stop crime in progress exactly. They aren't police officers and have no legal remit to stop crime or punish people who have not been properly sentenced. The Red Death waits until everything is nice and justified before locking you in an iron cage and putting on the thumbscrews. You see, the Mercykillers have to abide by the law just like everyone else. If they break it, they must be punished, usually much more harshly than an ordinary person. Breaking even a minor infraction could result in the death penalty for a Mercykiller. They have to keep up appearances after all and appear to be law-abiding. But there's a major point here that makes the Mercykillers look incredibly hypocritical. The Red Death is allowed to break the law, any law, including murder, in order to bring about a just resolution. We have this in the real world as a major part of our theories on just war. Nations believe that we are allowed to kill and harm others, even innocents, if the greater good is served. Thus, hundreds of thousands of German or Japanese civilians could be killed by bombing in order to stop the horrid racist tyrannies controlling both of those countries. A Mercykiller can break laws pretty freely as long as he can somehow justify it afterwards. A good-aligned boss would be skeptical and ask tough questions about whether or not his subordinate strictly had to break the law during his quest, while an evil Mercykiller superior would be pretty comfortable in letting pretty much anything fly in the name of the law. The notion of what constitutes a just act of violence is likely to spawn lively debate amongst an adventuring party, especially if there are more chaotic or roguish characters in the group. Mercykillers, as the name implies, have vowed to eliminate all pity and mercy. These thoughts are just obstacles on the path to pursuing justice. A Mercykiller character is a hardened member of the criminal justice system of Sigil. She'll know everything about the brutal crooks and cross-traders in this planar hub. Mercykillers can use a spell-like ability to detect lies once a day, reflecting their long experience hearing the lies of criminals deep in the pits of the prison. Sense motive is also a class skill for them always. Once a day, a Mercykiller can make a special attack in the name of justice. If it hits, she'll do double damage, though she'll take up half of the damage herself, making this a little less useful than it appears. I would ignore the latter part about taking half total damage to herself. That might make it OP to some people, but I think it's really cool to have a justice strike for the Mercykiller character, and that really adds something to the class. The most interesting type of Mercykiller for a player character is, of course, the bounty hunters. Going out into the plains and tracking down sods who skipped out on their due offers plenty of excitement for a Mercykiller character. And they have a special subclass all their own called the Justicar. Thought Mass Effect was the first to use that obscure medieval judicial term? Well, think again. The Justicars of the Red Death are quite a bit like Samara from Mass Effect 2, so if you're familiar with her, you'll know quite a bit about the concept.
We hold a unique place in Asari culture. Justicars are from another era. Young Asari grow up watching vids about our adventures. Pure fiction, of course. Some Asari are uncomfortable with us, but so few Justicars exist that most have never met one. Few Asari wish to make the sacrifices necessary to become one of us, and the training has a high casualty rate. It is a life of constant danger. Throughout the entire galaxy, there are only a handful of us at any time. It is 5,000 sutras and covers every situation one can encounter. I have memorized every word. There is only the code.
Sometimes justice calls for mercy.
It does not exist to bring about spiritual enlightenment. Its purpose is to punish the wicked and protect the innocent. In this age, people see shades of gray everywhere. The code of the Justicar is black and white. I might seem a hero to many, but I would kill all of them if I had to. I would say that the closest human equivalent is a knight-errant in your medieval lore, perhaps mixed with a bit of samurai. I am compelled to kill the wicked.
A remorseless seeker of evil that swears an unbreakable oath to root out criminals wherever they hide. They sign an oath in blood. Breaking the oath, I like to imagine, even though this isn't mentioned, is like breaking a geas. Impossible, in other words, without leading to their own death. Then they're magically bound to the criminal they're seeking. It's impossible, even across the planes, for that sense of direction to be altered or stopped. They can find him wherever he's hiding throughout the entire planes. Mercykillers are one of the scariest factions out there. Even their nickname, the Red Death, sounds more like a tidal wave of blood or a medieval plague. It's also plural, not like any of the other ones, which are all singular. Not a Red Death, but the Red Death, as if all of them work together as an inexorable tide of pain to sweep over you. It seems easy enough to turn a Mercykiller into an unpleasant character. A person you can't really empathize with because they're a one-man army out for justice like Steven Seagal, or a cruel, brutal warden who tortures and kills people just because the law told him to without thinking about it.
You're an impressive one. Your eyes still sparkle with life. Oh, now there, don't worry. I'll stay away from the vital bit. You won't die yet. You see, I've been ordered by our king to keep you around at least another 3 years. But I don't know. I like you. It's been said that youth is wasted on the young. But I don't know. A man does have to live with the consequences of his actions. And your actions have led you here, I'm afraid. What a waste.
They've even simplified all punishments for crime into 3 categories. All serious felonies, such as murder or arson, receive the death sentence immediately. All misdemeanors, such as assault, begging, or even vagrancy, receive 10 years imprisonment in Acheron. That's part of hell, by the way. And everything else, such as failure to pay fines and white-collar crimes, is 10 years imprisonment in the prison. 10 years. Cheerful, friendly bunch, aren't they? It's quite easy to have a villainous Mercykiller, a sadist who revels in torture rather than actually bringing about justice. Perhaps you can play the character as a man who was once gentle and kind, but the relentless brutality of the plains hardened them into a tough, cold bastard, ready for revenge no matter who gets hurt in the process. Maybe they were a clueless that accidentally walked into a portal and ended up in Sigil, surrounded by God knows what kind of races in a place he'd never visited before in one of the toughest towns in the entire plane. And that maybe turned him after being repeatedly victimized by crime again and again deep in the heart of the Hive into a really rough, mean, cruel character who wanted to get justice and attack the world that so brutally attacked him. But not all Mercykillers are evil, brutish, or unsympathetic. A more challenging Mercykiller to play would be one who experienced a horrid crime, one that was beyond explanation or forgiveness. A vile act so huge and incomprehensible that the only way he can sleep at night is to seek punishment for the guilty. The Mercykillers are often seen as callous and violent, but you should put yourself in the shoes of the victim of a crime. What if you saw the world around you stop caring? Empathy was replaced by apathy, and you were left in the cold with an imperfect way to get justice. You know that the savages who wronged you and others still exist out there in the world, somewhere, living their lives happy and free. It would be maddening. A Mercykiller could be the greatest of heroes, someone who bucks all authority and refuses to forget about the crimes of the past, because justice never sleeps, and no matter where you are or how long it's been, you will be found and punished. They could spend the rest of their lives seeking justice. He could quite easily be a heroic figure that hears his dead kin calling out for justice against criminals every waking moment and devotes everything to rectifying that event.
The statute of limitations will be at the end of next year, and after that time, when we will find new people, they commit crimes, or find new evidence about people, they are free. We cannot bring them for justice in Germany. And this means thousands. This means thousands of people, because we lost 11 million witnesses, and tons of German documents are destroyed, and other documents are not available because they are in communist countries, and for political reasons they don't help. East Germany never answered one request of the West German judges. They never answered one letter of me.
Open matter for the future, as a warning for the murderers of tomorrow. Maybe they are born today. We never knew when the murderers of our families was born, that they will never rest. Many crimes was committed without order, only because some people from on the basis of hate or as a manifestation of their ideology. These people should know that the world is so small that will not be place for them. We are waiting now for this tradition of a man from La Plata in Argentina, 45 years after the crime, 9,000 kilometers from the place of the crime. The man will got life. He will be maybe 2 years in jail, and then he will pass away. This is a warning.
In some ways, the Mercykillers have one of the least complex philosophies among the factions. They find criminals and punish people for the crimes they commit. There's a lot of room for complexity there, however. A disturbing lack of medievalism is a problem I mentioned in one of my previous Planescape videos about issues you could run into while DMing a game. In quite a few modern RPGs, they treat the world you live in as if it's a medieval land filled with modern people, as if they were teleported there from the future. The mindset and attitude of the people just isn't medieval. Like when you play as an amateur policeman tracking down crooks in Dragon Age 2. The Mercykillers truly inhabit the mental space of pre-modern people when it comes to justice. Among the most ancient and most sacred concepts of all world religion is that of universal order. The ancient Mesopotamians and Egyptians, the founders of civilization, implicitly believed in the idea that the universe was bound by cosmic order. The world, and typically its creatures, was born of primeval chaos and order imposed upon it by the gods. Tiamat was a watery deity, or natural force perhaps, in ancient Mesopotamia that helped to generate the water, earth, and heaven. She was also a goddess of chaos that spawned a variety of monstrous creatures that needed to be slain by the servants of order, the gods. The Egyptian goddess Mot was not merely a deity, but the personification of justice and order itself. The pharaoh was said to speak Mot and project the will of order onto the universe. Mot is the equilibrium of everything. The movement of the planets, the governing and reason of the natural order, and even truth itself. Thus, anyone who violates the law is not just a criminal who ends with himself and his victim. He is an assailant of the planes themselves who is trying to, however slightly, offend against the sturdiness of the multiverse. The cosmos in this thinking is inherently violable, able to be reduced in some way back to universal chaos, and men must work, often through the gods, to preserve law, both sacred and mundane, to preserve the universe. In the video game Planescape Torment, this notion is expressed in the most dramatic of forms. Your main character, the Nameless One, is revealed to have done something to the outer planes that is causing them to slowly die. The entirety of the universe may follow suit and bring about the closing down of all life and energy in a great cosmic entropy. The mere act of severing your own mortality from your body destroyed a linchpin of the planes. You broke the necessary rules that all life must follow, that it can be unmade. You discover a character named Vylor deep inside a hellish prison plane of Carcerai. Vylor is a powerful Mercykiller who devoted his life to tracking down the Nameless One and wreaking terrible vengeance upon him. If justice is imposed somehow on your character, it may rebalance the scales of justice and restore some sense of existence for everyone to live in. The law, to a Mercykiller, is not just an abstract concept or something that generally must be upheld for the common good. To disobey is the headwaters of sin, and they must fix all the cracks in the wall every time they appear or the cosmic dam will burst. Breaking the law is a pulsing force of evil that overrides everything and must be preserved through the sympathetic magic of justice and revenge. The Mercykillers believe that perfection is the goal of the universe. Crime must be rectified, and when it's judged and erased from the planes, perfection will be restored. A practice of the ancient and medieval world was to put a corpse on trial. A person who powerfully transgressed the law would need to be tried and justice served even if they no longer physically existed. To a modern person, this sounds ludicrous. We are proudly in favor of the consequentialist interpretation of the law. The law in our society, in theory anyway, exists to halt more lawbreaking, stop someone who would continue to be dangerous, and reform people so they don't break laws again. The process is about thinking towards the future and how we can make things better from now on, so a dead person can't be tried, usually. There's no point, really, if another crime isn't going to be committed. Medieval people tended to follow another, still extant but out of favor version of retributive justice. That ties right into the thousands of years old idea of righting the essential justice of the universe. You who have so badly wounded the state or man or God or nature should be heard in return. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, as the Bible and one of the oldest law codes ever, Hammurabi's Code, say.
Well, these new ridiculous ideas have come at last, and orders are orders. Though I may say to you in confidence, I do not approve. An eye for an eye, I say. If someone hits you, you hit back, do you not? Why then should not the state, very severely hit by you brutal hooligans, not hit back also? The new view is to say no. The new view is that we turn the bad into good. All of which seems to me to be grossly unjust, eh?
Shut your filthy hole, you scum!
You are to be reformed.
The body of the accused, including at one time a former pope, would be propped up in a chair and tried, in order to restore, in whatever faint way they could, the power and authority of rightness, truth, and justice. It seems somewhat pointless to our eyes, but another important factor of justice is to publicly condemn the behavior, to open everything that the criminals did to the world and show each and every person how wrong it was. To escape justice by fleeing or even by suicide would still require the public to hold a trial and sentence you, just in order to show that your behavior was unwanted and seen as wrong by others.
I know Leo Johnson isn't in very good shape. On the surface, it might seem ridiculous to make him stand trial, but a trial does more than just punish the wrongdoer. It also brings a feeling of justice and retribution to a community. Among the various crimes Leo Johnson is suspected of, the murder of Laura Palmer is a sort that can wound an entire town. As long as Leo Johnson carries a breath, he is as eminently deserving of a trial as this community is of a sense of resolution. All right.
Getting your just reward for evil behavior is important, even if only to destroy your reputation in the history books. Lest you see it as purely theoretical, think of how important it is for people to be rehabilitated, even posthumously, for false accusations of crime such as the bantamweight divisions in World War I, or the millions condemned during Stalin's purges. We all feel the weight of falseness and treachery for a state that punished or destroyed its own citizens unfairly. A lawful evil mercy killer may enforce the law so zealously that he ensnares innocents in punishment or death, while a lawful good mercy killer may do exhaustive research on people he suspects of innocence. The freeing or rehabilitation of the unjustly condemned in the past is just as important to justice. The Mercykillers are also the most divided of all the factions in Sigil. They were formed around the time of the Great Faction Crunch. Originally, the lady didn't give a damn how many factions there were and what they got up to as long as they didn't cross her. But after untold millennia of factional warfare, the lady had had enough. She decreed 5 centuries ago that there were to be only 15 factions within the city, or else. Even the dumbest sods in the city know not to cross the lady, so everyone scrambled to sort out their affairs. They dissolved their factions, fought for a place in the sun, absorbed other factions that were largely similar, or in the case of the Mercykillers, united 2 rather disparate factions into one new group. The 2 factions that became the Red Death were the Sons of Mercy and the Sod Killers. The Sods were violent, aggressive mercenaries and bounty hunters. They may have vaguely worked towards some sort of justice, but it was usually rank vigilantism or the wreaking of vengeance. The second group was a bunch of self-righteous bloods called the Sons of Mercy. They were dedicated to tirelessly working to stop unjust punishment and rescue people from brutally harsh prison sentences. The 2 decided that instead of giving up their cause, they would be able to war it out with the other factions by combining their efforts. The merger allowed them to survive the tumult and the Mercykillers were born. The faction's very existence necessitates bending and twisting two alternate concepts of justice towards a purely lawful goal. The Sons of Mercy were clearly lawful good. They especially attract paladins to their cause of liberating people from savage, undeserved punishment. But the presence of the Sod Killers drags them down away from their high and mighty goodness towards a darker, more cynical approach of justice. In a way, it prevents them from being a little bit too lenient than they otherwise would in the harsh, merciless interpretation of justice they need to truly punish the guilty. But it works the other way, too. The Sod Killers were brutes without much purpose, but adapting to a higher code of meting out punishment and justice has pushed that clearly lawful evil practice upward to the middle, so both of their conflicting goals sit there today. Good and evil making themselves subordinate to the whims of pure law. In some ways, this divide has formed a permanent rift in the faction between sadistic torturers and virtuous do-gooders motivated by sympathy. This division is not without its benefits, however. It's a harsh but effective way to preserve the impartiality of justice. You can't be just with cruelty, but you're overreaching in the other direction if kindness or mercy get in the way. A mercy killer can't allow his personal feelings to get in the way of applying justice. Only a cold, harsh, and methodical application of the law can purge the stain of criminality. Else you'll just be creating more injustice. The headquarters of the Mercykillers is, naturally, the prison in Sigil. The prison is the most foreboding and frightening building in the entire city. It's a brutal, ugly building, many blocks long and 7 stories high. The patrols of dogs and armed guards day and night don't add to its friendliness either. Inside, the prison is a dirty, stone-floored Victorian horror show. The prisoners are often brutally mistreated by the guards, given inadequate food or exercise, and it's not uncommon to die within the walls. The laws and rules they have to follow are absolutely brutal and horrifying, and have their echo in terrifying rules during the Victorian era, where there were things like the rule of silence, which forbid anyone from ever speaking during their prison term. It could easily drive even the toughest person insane because of its brutality. There are even special subterranean cells that house prisoners selected for especially brutal mistreatment. The prison is filled with every kind of medieval torture device, and the guards aren't shy about doling out this kind of punishment. The prisoners are a motley assortment of property criminals like thieves, hardened criminals like murderers and thugs, or innocent people trapped in the webs of justice. The prison is where the rift between the good and evil parts of the faction is at its highest. The Sons of Mercy were formed to stop grossly inappropriate punishments. The lack of justice in a man stealing a pumpkin from the back of an ox cart being condemned to 30 years in prison is much worse than any form of theft. The Sons and the Sods are two opposing forces of justice. One medieval and one modern. The ancient and medieval version of justice is harsh and swift. The state is attempting to restore the mythical balance of the universe by restoring equality to a victim. Thus, a life taken must be balanced by taking a life. The old world was very much about retributive justice. Justice is about giving the same as you get. When you died in ancient Egyptian religion, your heart or soul was plucked out by the personification of justice, Mot. She would then weigh your soul against its crimes, and if there was imbalance, you were cast down into a pit, and a terrible demon would devour you to restore balance to the universe. The retributivists restore their own legitimacy either as an individual or the state by striking back at a vile crook. The Sons of Mercy are very much advocates for modern justice. Justice, beginning in the 18th century during the Enlightenment, became more about protecting the rights of the individual from the ravages of the state rather than protecting the state from the ravages of the individual. The state was reversed from the victim of a crime by a transgressor to the potential enactor of injustice to weak and vulnerable citizens. The laws enshrined at this time by the Declaration of Man and Citizen and the U.S. Constitution recognized the protection of the accused from false justice is the guiding role of our court system. This radical reversal in the status of state and man is what drives the more Sons of Mercy-like members of the faction. A considerable amount of even present-day justice is based around things not strictly about the crime itself. Judges are still allowed to make examples out of people in order to discourage others from committing crime. Victims are allowed to have input in how much a criminal should be punished to satisfy their own need for revenge. Whether or not the accused has a career that makes an important impact on the community, if the criminal committed crimes in the past or is predisposed to commit them in the future, can all violate individual rights and skew justice towards something that is unjust. The two sides have found a modus vivendi that allows them to work together. But the Sons of Mercy wing could be seen as working against the faction itself by freeing people the Sods want to torture and brutalize. It may be that the greatest enemy for the faction is just people within their own faction that are trying to interpret justice in a different way. And the titanic differences between the two groups may prove irreconcilable, and they may decide that the greatest enemy that they have to fight is someone else who's also trying to work justice, just in a very, very different way.
Really? He's going to sentence me to death? Sounds interesting. I accept your challenge, El.
Each of them has to hunt down the other without knowing the other's name or face, and the first one whose identity is revealed will die. Humans are so much fun.
El, Kira. I will hunt you down wherever you're hiding, and I will eliminate you. I am justice.
Relations between the Mercykillers and the other factions are strained, to say the least. Part of their duties include torture and execution. The Burks responsible for flogging, Iron Maidens, and the gallows don't make for very sociable types. At least not usually. I usually like to include in these discussions sort of a humorous interpretation that you can find of a character, but it would be pretty difficult for the Mercykillers. Unless you like gallows humor, I'm sorry about that.
Out here would like a bit of a chinwag.
Oh, lovely. Always keen to meet new people.
Corporal Jones and Privates Fraser, Robinson and Tipplewhite.
Hello, Private. Hello. 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 Well, nice of you to drop by. And what do you do?
We're your firing squad, sir.
Of course you are.
Good-sized chest. Shut up, lad. Sir. You see, us firing squads are a bit like taxmen, sir. Everyone hates us, but we're just doing our job, aren't we, lads?
My heart bleeds for you.
Well, sir, we aim to please. Just a little firing squad joke there, sir.
The Mercykillers get along well enough with the Governors and Hardheads. In theory, they enact the will of both these groups. But the Mercykillers are usually a bit more enthusiastic, a bit more violent, and may enjoy using the law for cruelty. They don't like being held by the demands of the other two factions, and occasionally chafe at their leash. But typically a Mercykiller will see himself as the final cog in the machine of justice. They're just the ones that have the least appealing part. It would be pretty terrifying if a Mercykiller went beyond what he was supposed to do and started acting as judge, jury, and executioner all at the same time. That would lead to total chaos, oddly enough, for a group that believes in total law. The other factions in Sigil are a different story. The Red Death is a source of fear and loathing for most chaotic factions. Any disorder and anarchy will get you caught in the blind sometimes, and that means your ultimate fate will be done by the Mercykillers. Brutal beatings, medieval torture, and guillotines have not endeared many an anarchist or freeleaguer to their company. The Sensates, with their philosophical penchant for lawbreaking to follow their whims and desires, have crossed paths with justice on more than a few occasions. And the Bleak Cabal, with their fondness for homeless people and other transients or people at the very bottom of society, probably crossed the Red Death on more than a few occasions. And those groups in particular may have a white-hot rage at the very idea of working with the Red Death. Violence may be a frequent part of the cycle of arrest, torture, execution, and revenge, as terrorists of any faction ironically take upon themselves the mantle of justice by murdering a Mercykiller they think has crossed the line of morality. The Doomguard is an intriguing case. They occasionally take pleasure in helping the Red Death because they believe the quest for justice, which involves cruelty, violence, torture, and death, can lead to their ultimate goal of decay and entropy. On the other hand, the Mercykillers have no desire to assist the Sinkers in any enterprise that may compromise the existence of the multiverse. The Mercykillers, just like Vylor did, are trying to uphold the balance of the universe by sloughing off their rot of crime and injustice. Seeing it fade into nothingness could be the highest on their list of crimes to punish, as it explicitly unmakes the very laws binding reality together. Depending on the Mercykiller, however, relations with other factions may be friendly, or at least not openly hostile. A Free Leaguer or Bleaker may see much to admire in a Mercykiller paladin trying to liberate a destitute hive transient with a life sentence for bankruptcy. A party may include a Mercykiller and a freewheeling chaotic character that must overcome their mutual distrust and see each other's positions in life. While fear and grudging respect are usually the attitude to the Red Death, it's entirely up to the player to embrace the terror or deny that part of himself and prove justice as the ultimate source of good. Racially, the Red Death is quite welcoming to any lawful group, including fiends. Since a huge part of their faction is punishment and torture, Byakuza and their ilk are quite happy within the walls of the prison. They get to brutalize people, all while fitting in with a society that would typically reject them as alien and vile. The home plane for the Mercykillers is Acheron, one of the hellish lower planes. Along the Great Wheel, Acheron is placed between the plane of ultimate law, Mechanus, and the plane of lawful evil, the Nine Hells. Creatures of Acheron primarily do evil not for its own sake, but to bring about organization, like a brutal drill instructor that terrorizes his recruits to create military discipline, or Tsarist Cossacks who ride into a crowd of protesters to restore respect for the law, even if those protesters are right. Presumably the faction has considerable holdings in the hellish plane and could be of great use in a campaign requiring entry to that hellish abode of ceaseless battle. Having friends and a place to hide out could make a dramatic difference to your chances of survival. Any of the naturally chaotic races like elves would be very unlikely to be Mercykillers, much like the Harmonium. Though it may be possible for them to change their alignment, they'd be looked upon with suspicion. Quite a few fighters, clerics, monks, and wizards are quite at home within the faction. The most recent leader of the faction was actually a wizard. But barbarians are virtually non-existent, and rogues are treated with great suspicion if they're allowed in at all. As with the Harmonium, playing a lawfully aligned rogue trying to enforce justice is an interesting choice rich with incident. She would likely be mistrusted by everyone, and just getting a job there if there's criminal history in her past would be almost impossible. Paladins are another interesting choice for the faction. Depending on your DM, the Mercykillers could be dominated by lawful good folk and largely rein in the less-than-friendly underlings and keep the torture and beheading to a minimum. On the other hand, the faction could be polluted to the core with evil sods, and the Paladins are a despised and distrusted minority. They routinely get assigned the most dangerous and terrible work while fighting a corrupt system that doesn't like do-gooders meddling in their affairs. Negatives of being a Mercykiller should be obvious. Everyone is scared of you. People may be frightened by the hardheads, but they could also be persuaded to speak to a copper he thought was friendly. But the Red Death is designed to be terrifying and creates an aura of fear around itself. It could be used to intimidate people like Batman, scaring crooks into giving information. But it could just as easily backfire by causing people to run at the first sign of a Mercykiller or clam up in fear of incriminating oneself. The intimidation factor and the reputation of the Mercykillers is a double-edged sword that you have to play very finely because it could just as easily backfire on you, but it could be incredibly useful too. So overall, what do I think of the Red Death? Well, when I initially read about them, I was very skeptical for a long time, for quite a few years. I just wasn't really into them, and primarily saw them as being villainous and unpleasant. However, later on in my Planescape playing days, I decided to go ahead and play one of the factions that I never played as, which is the Mercykillers. And I ended up having a really interesting, fun time with it, and really kind of saw the faction in a very different light and saw how they can be heroic. I've always been a fan of the Shadow. He's one of my favorite superheroes, and I even like him honestly a little bit better than Batman. And playing this character that's out for justice to go on and strike a blow against the criminal community is something that anybody can sympathize with. It may seem callous or cruel, but most of the time when I hear about a crime that went unpunished, I don't really care, and I think most people feel that way too. They're not going to really feel the need to go out and avenge another victim out there if it's not them or someone they know. But the Mercykillers are dedicated very much to going out there and trying to fight against all of the evil garbage that happens in the world. Because it can cause pain, misery, and suffering if you have a crime that goes unpunished. It could totally transform your life, how you act, how you feel, how you think, how you behave. And ultimately trying to right wrongs is a good thing in the end. And what I originally suspected was a very boring and dull kind of philosophy compared to some of the others is actually really rich and exciting. Unlike some of the other factors which have more complicated and convoluted types of philosophies, this one has a direct effect on our real life. And it involves things like law enforcement, crime, justice, and punishment that affect everyone in the real world right now. Everything is very immediate and something that we can understand and really want to talk about. So ultimately, the Mercykillers are a fascinating group that have some of the most difficult to play and complicated types of philosophies that can radically alter to be totally different. It's one of the ones in which there's a stark 180-degree contrast between the good and the evil versions of it. And playing it with that kind of conflict in the game is always going to be fascinating, so I'd say check the Mercykillers out, even if you're not too sure about them, because the conflict there between law and order and evil law and order is fascinating.
I should have put you down myself, personally.
You know, I never understood that. Why did you judge me? Why did you judge me?
You killed innocent people.
The means to an end.
You started a massacre.
I caused the revolution.
You betrayed the law.
Law!